In today's video, I want to talk a little bit about how to stop feeling anxious and guilty over spending money. And this is something that I've dealt with in the past. And to be honest with you, I'm still dealing with it a little bit, even though I have gotten better. And I'm sure a lot of you out there have these feelings too. On one hand, feeling guilty, it can be a positive thing because it means that you are aware of your spending habits. And if the guilt is justified, then there's an opportunity to learn a lesson, and hopefully you won't repeat these spending patterns. You're able to spend less and save more, which is always great. But on the other hand, it is not healthy to always feel anxious or guilty about spending money, especially if this leads to you depriving yourself or if this guilt becomes unbalanced. And if you get to this point, even if you need something or you can afford something, you may always question a purchase. So in today's video, we are going to look at a few tactics that can help you overcome this. And I'm also going to include some tips that I've used in my own life to help me overcome this problem. But before I get started, if you are new here, welcome. I am a personal finance writer. So I create different videos on various money topics. So if you like videos like this and you want to see more, do hit the subscribe button below. The first thing you have to do is understand the guilt or the fear. And this is essential because whether you realize it or not, there is something at the root of these feelings. So look deep within yourself and seriously ask, why am I feeling guilty? And this will vary for everyone. For some people, maybe you're feeling guilty because you know you're spending money that you don't really have to spend. Or maybe you hit a rough financial patch in the past, and even if you're on a good path today, you may fear being broke again. And as a result, that causes you to hoard money. Or it might even go back to the way you were raised. Maybe you grew up in a household where you were kind of conditioned to think that spending money was wrong. Whatever the reason, really try to look within yourself and understand these feelings, because by doing that, then you can determine whether or not your guilt is justified. Another thing you can do is plan ahead for big purchases. Now, there is nothing wrong with spending money on things that we technically don't need. The problem is when we go overboard and we start buying too much of the things that we don't need. This can start a pattern of frivolous buying and impulse buying. And if we do this enough, it can also lead to feelings of guilt after the fact. The best and simplest way to resolve this type of guilt is to really plan ahead for purchases, especially big purchases. This way, you're able to get the things you want. However, you're not taking money out of your emergency fund that you need for emergencies. You're not using money that you need for bills, and you're not getting into long-term debt. I find that when I have money earmarked for a specific purchase, even if it's an expensive purchase, I feel so much better about buying this item, and I don't have any anxiety or guilt about spending the money. It's also important to leave a buffer in your budget for indulgences, because what's the point of working hard if you can't ever let loose and enjoy any of it? Now, I'm not a millennial. However, I used to get slightly annoyed when I would read these articles of different writers criticizing this generation for spending their money on avocado toast, saying that this is the reason why this generation is not saving money. Not only because ain't nobody spending that much money on avocado toast, but also because it sends the message that indulging is wrong, and God forbid if you don't save every penny you earn. So when someone indulges and then they read an article like that, they may feel as if they're doing something wrong, which can add to the guilt. Now, granted, you don't want to indulge every single day because that wouldn't be smart, but if you have it, it's okay to enjoy it. And I do believe that it is possible to be responsible and have fun. So my point of saying all that is, when you create your budget for the week or the month, not only should you set aside money for savings, you should also set aside a little fun money, a little indulgence money. This way you can go out there, have your cup of coffee, take yourself out to lunch without feeling guilty. It's also important that you don't make quick financial decisions. I find that my anxiety about spending money tends to worsen when I have to make those split-second decisions about finances. Sometimes we have to make quick decisions. That's just the way it is. But if you have some time, make sure that you really reflect on how that decision is going to impact you going forward, and make sure you really consider all your options. And this is important because when you rush, it can lead to making a bad decision that could end up costing you more money in the long run. And it can also lead to anxiety because without having time to really think things through, you may sit back and question whether or not you made the right decision. So give yourself a moment, weigh the pros and cons, and then decide what to do. Another thing you can do is keep saving your money. Now, in emergency savings, it's there for those unexpected expenses, but even when a withdrawal is justified, sometimes there is anxiety about taking money out the bank, especially when we're taking out a large sum, which makes absolutely no sense because that's why we have the account in the first place. And I experienced this very recently. I have a 10-year-old car, so back in April, I had to take $1,000 out of the bank to do a car repair, and it was necessary in order for my car to pass inspection. And I'm not gonna lie, having to take that much money out at one time, I mean, that really hurt because that was probably the biggest car expense I've had thus far. But what really softened the blow is that this repair did not take everything I had. So my point is, even once you hit your savings goal, continue to save money, continue to put away your cash. By doing so, this can help you feel less anxiety when you do have to tap your account for something big. Another thing is to stop thinking that you don't deserve your money. And this is something that I'm sure a lot of people struggle with, especially if you have more money than maybe your friends or your family, which allows you to do more things and maybe you don't have as many financial struggles as they do. This can be income that you earn from work, maybe you received an inheritance or a settlement. Either way, if you sit around thinking that you don't deserve what you have, this is another thing that can really take your happiness. Now, your situation, it is what it is. And honestly, you don't have to feel guilty for the things that you have. But if you are struggling with feelings of guilt, one thing you can do, or a couple of things you can do to help yourself feel less guilty, is to really practice gratitude and humility. You can give back, you can donate, you can find other ways to make good use of your money. And when it comes to being humble, that is also important because it is so much easier for people to be happy for you when you stay grounded and when you don't brag and when you don't make them feel as if they are financially inferior. And when others are genuinely happy for you, that guilt can slowly disappear. You also need to be realistic, especially if one of your biggest fears is that you'll end up broke and that prevents you from spending money. Now, to be honest, it can take time to overcome a fear like this, especially if you're dealing with some type of trauma from the past. But it does help to really keep your situation in perspective, because if you are still earning money and if you, for the most part, are a saver, splurging and buying something that you want from time to time is very unlikely to throw off your financial plan. Occasionally buying a new coat or maybe buying yourself a new pair of shoes, I mean, that is not going to prevent you from retiring at 65 if that is your goal, especially if you're doing everything else right. And the truth is, if you fear being broke, chances are you're not overspending anyway. You're probably a really savvy shopper, so thinking about things in those terms can really help calm some of that anxiety or guilt. It's also important to remember that you can't take it with you, and I'm not trying to sound morbid or anything, but it's the truth. Now, don't get me wrong, hoarding money during your younger years, that can make for a really fabulous and comfortable retirement. However, the fear of spending money does not go away automatically with age. So if you're this way as a young person, chances are you're also going to be this way as an older person. And if you always want to keep your money with you and you never want to spend it, I mean, you could really miss out on some great life experiences. So be balanced, save some, but also enjoy some. So there you have it. That's my list of a few things that have really helped me to kind of overcome that guilt and anxiety over spending money. But of course, this list, I mean, it really only scratches the surface. So if any of you out there have experienced this, or maybe you're currently going through this, comment below, let us know what works for you. And again, on this channel, we talk a lot about money topics. So if you haven't already, do consider subscribing. I post every weekend and sometimes during the week. So thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you in a few days.